Officer Brent Maddox thought he could get away with another show of force. He slammed a black woman against her car, his hand tightening on her throat. But what he didn't know was that this woman wasn't just anyone. She was Judge Vanessa Rhodes, the very judge assigned to decide his future in court. Now the power has flipped. The man who thought he owned the streets will have to answer in her courtroom. But with threats, lies, and a police department desperate to protect its own, will justice survive? Or will the system bury the truth again? Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Judge Vanessa Rhodes pushed her shopping cart across the parking lot of Westside Market. The evening air felt cool against her face after the stuffy fluorescent lighting inside. She'd traded her judicial robes hours ago for jeans and a simple navy sweater, grateful to shed the weight of her position, if only for a little while. The parking lot lights cast long shadows between the cars. Most spaces had emptied out this late on a Tuesday night. Vanessa checked her watch, 9:17 p.m. Her stomach growled, reminding her she hadn't eaten since noon. Almost there, she whispered to herself, steering the cart toward her silver Volvo sedan. Her shoulders ached from hunching over case files all day. The federal courthouse had been especially tense this week, with a string of high-profile cases landing on her docket. All she wanted now was to get home, heat up some soup, and maybe catch an episode of that cooking show she'd been meaning to watch. Vanessa reached her car and popped the trunk. She began transferring grocery bags, organizing them carefully so nothing would spill during the drive home. The eggs and bread went in last, placed gently on top of the heavier items. A pair of headlights suddenly flooded the area around her, making her squint. A police cruiser pulled up abruptly, parking at an angle that partially blocked her in. The high beams stayed on, blinding her. Vanessa shielded her eyes with her hand. "Hello," she called out, unable to see who was inside the vehicle. The driver's door of the cruiser swung open. A bulky figure stepped out, moving with rigid purpose. As he approached, Vanessa could make out his uniform, Philadelphia PD, and the hard set of his jaw. "Is there a problem, officer?" she asked, keeping her voice steady and polite. "You need to move your vehicle, ma'am." His voice came out sharp, impatient. "You're blocking the driving aisle." Vanessa glanced around, confused. Her Volvo was neatly parked, within the white lines of its space. "I'm sorry, but I don't understand. My car is properly parked." The officer stepped closer, and she could now read his name tag. Maddox. Officer Brent Maddox. His face was flushed, as if he'd been arguing before arriving here. "Don't get smart with me." His tone hardened. "Your cart is sticking out. It's a hazard." Vanessa looked at her shopping cart, which sat snugly against her open trunk. It wasn't blocking anything. Something about this didn't add up. "I'm almost done loading my groceries," she said calmly. "I'll be out of your way in just a minute." Officer Maddox stepped closer. He was tall, at least 6 feet, with broad shoulders that seemed to strain against his uniform. His eyes narrowed as he looked her up and down. "ID," he demanded, holding out his hand. "May I ask why you need my identification? I'm simply loading groceries into my car." Maddox's face darkened. "You're being uncooperative with an officer. ID, now." A cold feeling settled in Vanessa's stomach. She'd seen this before. Not personally, but in countless cases that had come through her courtroom. Power being flexed unnecessarily. Authority demanding submission without cause. "Officer Maddox," she said, trying to de-escalate, "I'm happy to comply, but I'd like to understand what regulation I'm violating." "Listen, lady," he snapped, stepping even closer. She could smell coffee and something minty on his breath. "When an officer gives you an order, you follow it. Period." Vanessa took a deep breath. 15 years on the federal bench had taught her to stay calm under pressure. She reached slowly for her purse in the shopping cart. "I'm getting my wallet," she explained, moving deliberately. "Hurry it up!" Maddox barked. As she opened her purse, a young couple walked past, glancing nervously at the scene. The woman whispered something to her partner, who shook his head and quickened their pace. Vanessa found her wallet and opened it to retrieve her driver's license. As she did, Maddox suddenly grabbed her wrist. "What's taking so long?" he demanded. "You hiding something in there?" "Please let go of my wrist," Vanessa said firmly. "I'm complying with your request." "Don't tell me what to do," Maddox growled, tightening his grip. Pain shot through Vanessa's arm. "You're hurting me, officer." Several more shoppers had stopped at a distance, watching the encounter unfold. An older man with grocery bags stood frozen by his truck. A teenage boy nudged his friend, pointing discreetly. "Officer, there are witnesses here," Vanessa said quietly. "Please, conduct yourself professionally." Something in Maddox snapped at her words, his face contorted with anger. "Are you threatening me?" he snarled. "No, I'm simply—" Before she could finish, Maddox yanked her away from the cart. With a forceful shove, he pushed Vanessa against the side of her car. The impact knocked the air from her lungs. Her purse fell to the ground, contents spilling across the asphalt. "You people always think you know better than the police," he hissed in her ear. Vanessa struggled to catch her breath. "Officer, this is completely inappropriate." His hand shot up, fingers wrapping around her throat, not squeezing hard enough to cut off air completely, but with enough pressure to make his threat clear. Vanessa's eyes widened in shock and fear. "Now you listen to me," Maddox said, his face inches from hers. "I've had enough attitude for one night." Vanessa couldn't speak. The pressure on her throat made words impossible. Her hands instinctively came up to his wrist, trying to pull it away. From the corner of her eye, she saw movement. The small crowd of onlookers had grown, and now, one by one, they were pulling out their phones. Camera lenses pointed in her direction. The distinctive sound of video recording apps starting up seemed impossibly loud in the quiet parking lot. Maddox's hand remained at her throat, his eyes burning with uncontrolled rage. The light from the phones illuminated his face, capturing every detail of his aggression for all to see. Vanessa's judicial training kicked in through the fear. Document everything. Remember every detail. This moment would matter later. The phones kept recording as Vanessa stood pinned against her car, the hand of Officer Brent Maddox crushing her throat, and the eyes of stunned bystanders witnessing it all. The crowd grew larger. Whispers spread through the gathering of shoppers as Officer Maddox kept his grip firmly around Vanessa's throat. His fingers pressed into her skin, not enough to stop her breathing completely, but enough to make each breath shallow and painful. "When I tell you to cooperate, you cooperate," Maddox barked, his face so close she could see the tiny burst blood vessels in his eyes. "You think you're special? You think the rules don't apply to you people?" Vanessa didn't struggle. Years in the courtroom had taught her that showing panic only escalated situations. She kept her eyes locked on his, refusing to look away, despite the fear coursing through her body. "I need to see some ID right now," he demanded again, spittle flying from his mouth. "Or we're going to have a much bigger problem." Vanessa's right hand moved slowly toward her fallen purse, careful not to make any sudden movements. Maddox watched her hand suspiciously, but didn't loosen his grip on her throat. "Hurry it up," he snapped. "I don't have all night to deal with uncooperative civilians." Her fingertips touched the edge of her wallet, which had fallen half open on the asphalt. With careful movements, she slid it closer, then picked it up. The leather felt cool against her trembling fingers. A young woman in the crowd called out, "She's not doing anything wrong. Let her go." Maddox turned his head sharply. "Stay back. This is police business." The distraction gave Vanessa just enough time to flip open her wallet. She held it up with as much dignity as she could muster while being pinned against her car. The gold federal judiciary badge gleamed under the parking lot lights, and beside it, her ID card with the unmistakable seal of the United States District Court. "My name," she said with remarkable steadiness, despite the pressure on her windpipe, "is Judge Vanessa Rhodes, Federal District Court of Eastern Pennsylvania." A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. Someone whispered loudly, "Oh my God, she's a judge." The phones recording the incident seemed to multiply. At least a dozen now capturing every moment. Officer Maddox's eyes widened as they darted from the ID to Vanessa's face. Recognition dawned in them, followed immediately by something else. Fear. His grip loosened slightly as the blood drained from his face. "Judge Rhodes?" he stammered, his voice suddenly higher. "Yes," she confirmed, her voice gaining strength. "The same Judge Rhodes who is scheduled to preside over the misconduct hearing of Officer Brent Maddox next month. That would be you, correct?" Maddox's hand fell away from her throat as if her skin had suddenly turned white-hot. He took an unsteady step backward, nearly tripping over the shopping cart. I didn't recognize you, Your Honor," he fumbled, his earlier confidence evaporating. "You weren't in your robes, and it's dark out here, and that makes it acceptable to assault a civilian?" Vanessa asked, straightening her sweater with steady hands. She could feel the tender spots on her neck where his fingers had been. Those would be bruises by morning. The crowd had fallen silent, phones still recording. Every eye was fixed on the unfolding scene, the aggressive officer now backing away from the calm, composed judge. "There's been a misunderstanding," Maddox said, forcing a strained smile. "I was responding to a complaint about blocked traffic in the parking lot. Just doing my job, Your Honor." Vanessa bent down slowly, gathering the scattered contents of her purse, lip balm, house keys, a small notebook. She placed each item back with deliberate care, taking her time. "A misunderstanding," she repeated, her voice cool and measured. "Is that what you call placing your hands on a woman's throat without provocation? Is that what you call threatening a civilian who was simply loading groceries into her car?" Maddox's face flushed again, but with embarrassment rather than anger. "I thought you were reaching for a weapon," he tried weakly. "Officer safety protocols." "Save it for the courtroom, Officer Maddox," Vanessa cut him off. She stood up straight, her full height still several inches shorter than his, but somehow she seemed to tower over him now. The power dynamic had completely reversed. Several bystanders had moved closer, emboldened by the revelation of Vanessa's position. A middle-aged man stepped forward. "Judge, I've got the whole thing on video if you need it," he offered, holding up his phone. "Me too," said a college-aged girl nearby. "He had no reason to put his hands on you." Vanessa nodded appreciatively. "Thank you. I would suggest that everyone who recorded this incident save that footage. It may be needed." Maddox's face grew paler with each word. He glanced around at the phone still pointed at him, the evidence multiplying by the second. "Look, Judge Rhodes, let's not blow this out of proportion," he said, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "We can handle this professionally between us. No need to make a big deal out of a simple patrol check." Vanessa closed her purse with a decisive snap. She picked up her last bag of groceries and placed it carefully in her trunk, then shut it. Every movement was measured, controlled, the exact opposite of Maddox's earlier aggression. "Officer Maddox," she said, turning to face him squarely. Her dark eyes met his, unflinching. "I believe in the legal system. I believe in due process. And I believe that actions have consequences." She walked to the driver's side door, opened it, and paused. The bruises forming on her neck were beginning to sting, but her voice remained steady. "You'll see me again, sooner than you think." Without another word, Judge Vanessa Rhodes slid into her car, started the engine, and drove away. In her rearview mirror, she could see Officer Maddox standing frozen in the parking lot, surrounded by witnesses with their phones still recording his humiliation. As she turned onto the main road, Vanessa took her first full, deep breath since the encounter began. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly to stop them from shaking. The adrenaline was beginning to fade, leaving behind the reality of what had just happened, and what would happen next. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the federal courthouse, casting long rectangles of light across the polished floor of Judge Vanessa Rhodes's chambers. She arrived earlier than usual, hoping to have some quiet time before the day's proceedings began. Her neck throbbed where Brent's fingers had pressed against her skin. She'd covered the marks with a high-collared blouse and silk scarf, but the memory of his grip remained vivid. As she set her briefcase down, she heard a quick knock at the door. "Come in," Vanessa called, her voice steady despite her restless night. Angela Kim, her law clerk, rushed in with a tablet in hand and concern etched across her face. At 29, Angela was one of the brightest legal minds Vanessa had ever mentored, always 10 steps ahead and fiercely loyal. "Judge Rhodes," Angela said, closing the door behind her. "Have you seen what's happening online?" Vanessa sighed. "I turned my phone off last night. I needed some peace." Angela's fingers tapped quickly on the tablet screen. "The video is everywhere. Someone posted it at 9:30 last night, and by midnight, it had over 100,000 views." She handed the tablet to Vanessa, who reluctantly took it. The footage was shaky but clear enough. Officer Maddox shoving her against the car, his hand at her throat, the shocked murmurs of the crowd. Then came the moment when she showed her ID, and his expression changed from smug authority to barely concealed panic. "There are dozens of videos from different angles," Angela continued, scrolling to show more clips. "This one caught what he said about you people, and this one has the clearest shot of him grabbing your throat." Vanessa placed the tablet on her desk and walked to the window. The city of Philadelphia spread out below, already bustling with morning traffic. Somewhere out there, Brent Maddox was probably being processed, his badge and gun taken away pending investigation. At least, that's what should be happening. "Have there been any official statements?" Vanessa asked. Angela's hesitation told her everything before she even spoke. "That's the thing, Judge. The department released a statement an hour ago. They're calling it a brief detainment following a civilian complaint. They claim Officer Maddox used standard restraint techniques when faced with non-compliance." Vanessa turned sharply. "Non-compliance? I was putting groceries in my car." "I know," Angela said, her voice tight with anger. "There's more. They're saying the video has been taken out of context and that Officer Maddox immediately released the individual upon confirming her identity." "As if that makes it acceptable," Vanessa muttered. Angela pulled up another page. "There's no mention of any disciplinary action, nothing about an arrest or even administrative leave." The news settled like a stone in Vanessa's stomach. She should have expected this. The blue wall closing ranks, protecting one of their own. But knowing it would happen didn't lessen the sting of injustice. "Judge Rhodes," Angela said carefully, "your bruises." Vanessa's hand went to her neck, touching the scarf gently. "They'll heal." "They're evidence," Angela insisted. "You should document them. File a report." A knock at the door interrupted them. Judge William Harding, one of the senior judges on the bench, peered in. His usual jovial expression was replaced with concern. "Vanessa, got a minute?" he asked, glancing at Angela. "It's fine. Angela's aware of everything," Vanessa replied. "Come in, Bill." Judge Harding closed the door and lowered his voice. "I just saw the video. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Vanessa said automatically. "Like hell you are," he responded, his gray eyebrows drawing together. "That officer assaulted you, in public, on camera. And yet, no arrest," Vanessa noted dryly. Harding sighed heavily. "That's partly why I'm here. The chief judge called an informal meeting this morning. Several of us were there. There's concern about your upcoming case. Vanessa felt her back stiffen. My upcoming case? Maddox's misconduct hearing, Harding clarified, though they both knew exactly which case he meant. Given last night's events, there's a feeling that perhaps you should recuse yourself. The suggestion hung in the air like smoke. Angela made a small sound of disbelief. Recuse myself, Vanessa repeated flatly. Because I was the victim of his assault? Shouldn't that be even more reason for accountability? Harding shifted uncomfortably. I'm just relaying the conversation, Vanessa. The concern is about the appearance of impartiality. Defense will claim you have a personal vendetta now. And what about justice? Vanessa asked, her voice remaining calm, though anger simmered beneath. What message does it send if I step aside after he assaulted me? That officers can intimidate judges with impunity? Politics, Harding said with a grimace. The department is already spinning this. They're suggesting you didn't identify yourself quickly enough, that you were confrontational. Angela couldn't contain herself. That's absurd. The videos clearly show. I know. Harding held up his hands. I'm on your side here. But you need to be prepared for what's coming. This isn't just about one officer anymore. The entire department is circling the wagons. After Harding left, promising his support whatever she decided, Vanessa stood motionless in the center of her chambers. Angela watched her, waiting. Get me everything on Maddox's case, Vanessa finally said. Every document, every witness statement, every piece of evidence. I want it all here by noon. You're not recusing yourself, Angela stated, rather than asked, relief evident in her voice. No, Vanessa said firmly. I'm not. When Angela left to gather the files, Vanessa closed her office door and leaned against it. Her throat ached, both from Maddox's grip and from the words she'd held back. She crossed to her desk where Brent Maddox's case file already sat. A thick folder containing allegations of excessive force against 3 different civilians over the past 2 years. Each time, the department had cleared him. Each time, the victims were people of color. She opened the file, staring at the photo of Maddox clipped to the inside cover. His smug smile seemed to mock her now. The same smile he'd worn as he pinned her to her car. It was clear now, the department wasn't just defending one of their own, they were protecting a system. Her hand went to her neck, feeling the tender spots beneath the silk scarf. This wasn't just about one assault in a parking lot anymore. This was about power, about who wielded it and who suffered under it. And somewhere in this courthouse, decisions were being made to ensure that power remained exactly where it had always been. Vanessa took a deep breath and began to read the file again, this time with new eyes. The day dragged on like a heavy weight. Vanessa moved through her afternoon docket with mechanical precision, but her mind kept returning to the Maddox file. By late afternoon, her chambers overflowed with evidence boxes. Angela had been thorough, pulling not just the official case documents, but newspaper clippings, internal affairs reports, and witness statements that never made it to court. The patterns were disturbing. 3 excessive force complaints in 2 years. All victims were people of color. All cases dismissed or settled quietly. All investigations concluded with the same phrase. Officer acted within departmental guidelines. Judge Rhodes? Angela poked her head in. It's almost 7. Everyone else has gone home. Vanessa looked up, surprised to see darkness outside her window. I lost track of time. I could stay and help, Angela offered, though exhaustion lined her face. No, go home. Get some rest. Vanessa stood, stretching her stiff back. We have a long fight ahead of us. Angela hesitated. Are you sure you'll be okay? After everything that happened? I've been a black woman in America for 46 years, and a judge for 15 of them, Vanessa said with a tired smile. This isn't my first encounter with intimidation. It's just the first one caught on video. After Angela left, Vanessa gathered her things. She slipped the most crucial documents into her briefcase. She'd review them again at home. The courthouse had emptied out, her footsteps echoing in the marble hallway as she headed for the back exit, where she'd parked that morning. The night air held the first hint of autumn coolness. The parking lot was mostly empty, security lights casting long shadows between the few remaining cars. Vanessa walked briskly, keys already in hand, when the flash of headlights caught her attention. A police cruiser sat near the exit, engine running. Even from a distance, she recognized the silhouette leaning against it. Officer Brent Maddox. Her steps faltered for just a moment before she forced herself to continue walking. She would not show fear, would not give him that satisfaction. As she approached her car, Maddox straightened up. His uniform was crisp, his badge catching the security lights. He looked completely at ease, as if he hadn't assaulted her just yesterday. "Evening, Judge Rhodes," he called, his voice carrying across the quiet lot. Vanessa kept walking, focusing on her car just 20 feet away. "That's cold," Maddox continued, pushing off from his cruiser to stand directly in her path. "No hello for the officer who helped you with your grocery troubles?" Up close, his eyes held the same cold arrogance she'd seen in the parking lot. His mouth curled in a smirk that made her skin crawl. "Officer Maddox," she acknowledged, her voice steady. "I believe you're in a restricted parking area." He laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Always about the rules with you judge types, isn't it? But rules work differently out here in the real world. Move aside, please. I'm going home." "Don't worry, I'm not stopping you." His smirk widened. "Just wanted to have a friendly chat about your day. Heard you've been asking for all kinds of files. Making quite a stir." The implication was clear. He had people watching her, reporting back to him. People inside the courthouse. "My work is a matter of public record," Vanessa replied, stepping to move around him. Maddox shifted slightly, not quite blocking her but making it clear he could if he wanted to. "That fancy robe you wear, it looks impressive, I'll give you that. Got all that authority sewn right into it." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "But at the end of the day, it's just cloth, isn't it? Doesn't stop anything that really matters." Vanessa met his gaze directly. "Is that a threat, Officer Maddox?" "A threat?" He placed a hand over his heart in mock offense. "I'm just making conversation. About how fragile things are. Robes. Justice." His eyes hardened. Life. The parking lot suddenly felt very empty. The distance to her car impossibly far. "Don't forget, Judge," he continued, voice low, "robes don't stop bullets." The words hung in the air between them. Vanessa's heart hammered in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral, her breathing controlled. "You're right about one thing," she finally said. "My robe is just cloth. But what it represents, the law, equal justice, accountability, that's what you should worry about." Maddox's smile faltered for just a second before he recovered. "Big words. Let's see how they hold up." He stepped back toward his cruiser. "Have a safe drive home, Judge. Lots of dangerous people out at night. Never know what might happen." He climbed into his patrol car, started the engine, and drove past her slowly, still wearing that smirk. She watched as his taillights disappeared around the corner, forcing herself to breathe. Only when he was completely gone did she allow her hands to shake. She fumbled with her keys, dropping them once before managing to unlock her car. Inside, she locked the doors immediately and sat gripping the steering wheel, waiting for her racing heart to slow. "He wants you scared," she whispered to herself. That's the point. The drive home felt longer than usual. Vanessa checked her rearview mirror at every stop, half expecting to see Maddox's cruiser following her. By the time she pulled into her driveway, her shoulders ached from tension. Her townhouse welcomed her with familiar silence. She set the alarm, checked the locks twice, then moved through the rooms, turning on lights. The darkness outside suddenly seemed threatening in a way it never had before. In her bedroom, she placed her briefcase on the bed and slipped off her suit jacket. Her judicial robe hung in its special section of her closet, black fabric that transformed her from Vanessa Rhodes to Judge Rhodes when she put it on. She reached out to touch it, running her fingers over the fabric. Maddox's words echoed in her mind. "Robes don't stop bullets." Vanessa carefully removed the robe from its hanger, feeling its weight in her hands. This simple garment represented everything she'd worked for, everything she believed in. In court, it was her armor. She hung it back up precisely, smoothing out invisible wrinkles. "I won't be intimidated," she whispered to the empty room, her voice growing stronger with each word. "Not by you. Not by anyone." Vanessa woke before her alarm. Sleep had come in broken fragments, her mind replaying Maddox's threats whenever she closed her eyes. She moved through her morning routine with deliberate focus. Shower, coffee, breakfast. The routine helped steady her. Today wasn't just any day. Today she would face Maddox in her courtroom. She dressed with extra care, choosing her most formal black suit. Her mother had always told her to armor up for important battles. As she fastened her pearl necklace, a graduation gift from her parents when she finished law school, she studied her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked composed, dignified, unshaken. "Keep it that way," she told herself. At the courthouse, she entered through the judge's private entrance. Security had been doubled, not for her protection, she knew, but because of the high-profile nature of the case. The hallways hummed with unusual energy. Angela waited in chambers, already surrounded by case files. "It's packed out there," she said, handing Vanessa her morning coffee. Media from every outlet in Philly, community activists, and at least 20 officers in uniform. Vanessa took a slow sip. 20 officers, you say? Front 2 rows, like they're making a statement. They are. Vanessa set down her cup. They're reminding everyone where their loyalty lies. Are you sure you don't want to recuse? I'm sure. Vanessa cut her off gently but firmly. That's exactly what they want. They'd get a new judge, maybe someone more flexible. Judge Carson is next in rotation, Angela said quietly. He plays golf with the police commissioner. Case closed then. Vanessa stood, reaching for her robe. Help me with this? Angela held the black robe as Vanessa slipped her arms through. The familiar weight settled on her shoulders, not a burden, but a reminder of purpose. Whatever happens in there, Vanessa said, make sure every word is in the official record. The walk to the courtroom felt longer than usual. Officer Reynolds, her regular bailiff, waited outside the double doors. Morning, Judge Rhodes. His eyes held concern he wouldn't voice. Morning, Reynolds. Busy day ahead. He nodded. I'll be right behind you. The bailiff opened the doors, and the room fell silent as she entered. Every seat was filled, reporters with notebooks poised, community members leaning forward expectantly. And just as Angela had said, the first 2 rows packed with officers in full uniform. Their faces were stone, a blue wall made flesh. And there at the defense table sat Officer Brent Maddox, wearing a pressed suit instead of his uniform. He turned as she entered, and their eyes locked. His held the same smug confidence from the parking lot. He actually had the nerve to give her a small nod, as if they shared some private understanding. All rise, called the bailiff. Vanessa took her position behind the bench, waiting until everyone stood before sitting. Be seated, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the courtroom. Commonwealth versus Maddox, case number 2023 CR 4857, she began, looking down at her docket. Pre-trial evidentiary hearing. Are counsel ready to proceed? The prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Marcus Williams, stood. Ready for the Commonwealth, Your Honor. Defense Attorney Richard Kellerman rose next. Ready for the defense, Your Honor. Vanessa nodded. Very well. Mr. Williams, you may begin. Williams approached the bench. Your Honor, the Commonwealth seeks to enter into evidence the body camera footage from Officer Maddox's encounter with Mr. Darnell Jackson on March 14th of this year, as well as surveillance footage from the convenience store where the alleged misconduct occurred. Objection! Kellerman was on his feet instantly. Your Honor, we have serious concerns about the integrity of this evidence. The body camera footage shows clear signs of tampering. What kind of tampering, Counselor? Vanessa asked, her tone neutral. Missing timestamps, unexplained gaps. We have an expert who will testify that this footage has been spliced together to create a false narrative. Williams shook his head. Your Honor, the Commonwealth's tech experts have verified the authenticity of this footage. The defense is trying to exclude the most damning evidence against Officer Maddox. I'd like to view the footage, Vanessa said. Proceed, Mr. Williams. The lights dimmed as the courtroom technician set up the video. On the large screen mounted on the wall, grainy body camera footage began to play. Officer Maddox could be seen approaching a young black man outside a convenience store, immediately aggressive in his stance and tone. The footage showed Maddox shoving the man against a wall, twisting his arm despite no resistance. The young man kept saying, "I didn't do nothing," while Maddox taunted him. Vanessa watched impassively, though her stomach tightened at the familiar pattern. From the corner of her eye she could see Maddox at the defense table, slouched back in his chair, completely unbothered by what the room was witnessing. When the video ended, Williams said, "The Commonwealth would also like to present civilian recordings of the same incident." "Objection!" Kellerman practically shouted. "These recordings are completely unreliable. Random bystanders with cell phones, editing who knows what." "Your Honor," Williams countered, "these civilian videos corroborate the body camera footage and fill in parts where Officer Maddox conveniently turned his camera away." Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. The blue wall in the front row shifted restlessly. "I'll allow it," Vanessa said. The civilian videos played next, 3 different angles of the same incident, all showing Maddox using excessive force on a compliant civilian. In one video, Maddox could be clearly heard saying, "Try running your mouth now, tough guy." Throughout the presentation, Vanessa felt Maddox's eyes on her. When she glanced toward the defense table, his expression hadn't changed. Still confident, still smug. He even winked at her when their eyes met. After the videos finished, Kellerman launched into a lengthy objection about chain of custody, reliability of civilian witnesses, and selective editing. His voice grew louder with each argument. "Furthermore, Your Honor, these videos don't show the full context. Mr. Jackson had been reported as suspicious, and Officer Maddox was responding appropriately to potential threat indicators." Williams stood to rebut. The suspicious person report came from a caller who said, and I quote, "There's a black guy hanging around outside." Mr. Jackson was waiting for his ride after buying a soda. The tension in the courtroom thickened. The officers in the front rows stared straight ahead, jaws clenched. Behind them, community members whispered angrily. "Your Honor," Kellerman said, his voice dripping with condescension, "we move to exclude all video evidence as prejudicial and potentially tampered with." Vanessa looked at Maddox again. He met her gaze steadily, the corner of his mouth turned up in that familiar smirk. He truly believed he would walk away from this, just like all the other times. "I've heard enough," Vanessa said, her voice cutting through the tension. "The court finds that the body camera footage and civilian recordings are relevant and material to these proceedings." She picked up her gavel. The videos show the same incident from multiple angles, providing necessary context for the jury. The defense's concerns about tampering are speculative at best and can be addressed during cross-examination. Kellerman started to interrupt, but Vanessa continued, her voice gaining strength. All video evidence will remain admissible. This court will not exclude critical evidence simply because it may be damaging to the defendant. She brought the gavel down with a sharp crack. Motion denied. The sound echoed through the suddenly silent courtroom. Vanessa's eyes found Maddox's face again, and for the first time since this began, she saw his confident smirk falter. Vanessa shut her chamber door with a quiet click. The morning session had been draining, not just because of the legal maneuvering, but because of the 20 pairs of hostile eyes drilling into her from the gallery. She slipped off her judicial robe and hung it carefully on the oak coat stand in the corner. "You held your ground in there," Angela said, unwrapping her own lunch. "I thought Kellerman was going to burst a blood vessel when you denied his motion." Vanessa smiled faintly. "I've seen his theatrical objections before. This time it felt different, though, like he expected me to cave." "It's not just Kellerman," Angela said, her voice dropping lower. "I overheard some talk in the hallway. Brent's union is throwing everything they have at this case." "What do you mean?" Angela wiped her hands on a napkin. "The Police Benevolent Association has apparently set up a special defense fund just for him. 6 figures, according to what I heard. They've hired expert witnesses, jury consultants, the works." Vanessa set down her sandwich. "For a misconduct case? That's unusual." "Not just unusual, unprecedented." Angela pulled out her tablet and tapped the screen a few times. "Look at this. They've never allocated this much for any other officer." Vanessa studied the figures Angela had pulled up. The legal fund for Brent's defense was massive, far beyond what would be considered normal, even for a high-profile case. "They're sending a message," Vanessa said quietly. "This isn't just about Brent anymore. It's about what happens when you challenge the system. Are you sure you want to—" "Yes," Vanessa said firmly. "I'm sure." Her phone buzzed on the desk. A text message from an unknown number. Vanessa picked it up, frowning. Recuse or regret it? Her expression must have changed, because Angela leaned forward. "What is it?" Vanessa turned the phone so Angela could see the message. Angela's eyes widened. "That's a threat. We need to report this." "To who?" Vanessa asked, her voice flat. "The police? The same department that's closing ranks around Brent?" Her phone buzzed again. Another message from the same unknown number. "Judges die, too." Vanessa's hand tightened around the phone. She kept her face composed, but her heart hammered in her chest. "This is crossing a line," Angela whispered. "You need protection." "What I need is to do my job." Vanessa set the phone face down on the desk. "This is exactly what they want, to scare me into stepping aside." Her phone rang, startling them both. This time, it was a familiar number, her brother Marcus. She answered, putting it on speaker. "Hey, sis." Marcus's voice was tight with concern. "You okay?" "I'm fine." "Why?" "I've been seeing stuff online about you and this cop's case." There was a rustling sound, like he was pacing. "There are forums where people are posting your home address, your schedule, saying horrible things." Vanessa closed her eyes briefly. "Marcus." "No, listen to me. These aren't just keyboard warriors. These are cops, Vanessa. Actual cops threatening my sister." His voice cracked slightly. "Mom and Dad are worried sick." "I can't back down now," she said. "I'm not asking you to back down. I'm asking you to be careful, to get protection." Angela nodded vigorously in agreement. "I'll think about it," Vanessa said, though they all knew what that meant. "That's not good enough." Marcus's frustration carried through the phone. "Remember what happened to Judge Torres in Arizona? He stood up to a corrupt sheriff and ended up with brake lines cut in his car. Vanessa remembered. The case had sent shockwaves through the judiciary. Torres had survived, but barely. "I'll be careful," she promised. "Tell Mom and Dad not to worry." After she hung up, Angela looked at her with naked concern. "He's right, you know. This is getting dangerous." Vanessa's phone buzzed again. Another text. "We know where your parents live too?" Her stomach dropped. This was escalating beyond what she had expected. It was one thing to threaten her. She had signed up for this job knowing there were risks. But her family? That crossed every line. Angela saw her expression change. "What now?" Vanessa slid the phone across the desk. Angela read it and gasped. "This is criminal intimidation. We need to make sure every piece of evidence in Brent's case is preserved," Vanessa interrupted. "Every video, every witness statement, every document, because that's what this is really about." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. Somewhere out there, Brent and his supporters were trying to bully her into submission, thinking she would crumble under pressure. "They're targeting you because you're a threat," Angela said. "Because you won't play along." "I know." Vanessa turned back to her desk and picked up her phone. With deliberate movements, she blocked the unknown number, then turned her phone off completely. The silence felt like a small victory. "What are you going to do?" Angela asked. Vanessa reached for her judicial robe, running her fingers over the smooth black fabric. It represented something bigger than herself, something worth protecting, even at personal cost. "I'm going to do exactly what they're afraid of," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "I'm going to make sure justice is served, no matter what." She slipped the robe back on, feeling its weight settle on her shoulders. "Let's get ready for the afternoon session. We've got work to do." Angela nodded, gathering their lunch remains. As she headed for the door, she paused. "Be careful, Vanessa. Please." Vanessa looked at her locked phone, thinking of the threats, the intimidation, the blue wall closing ranks. Fear whispered in her ear, urging caution, urging retreat. She pushed it aside. "No turning back now," she said, straightening her spine. "Whatever happens, I won't let them win." The courtroom fell silent as Vanessa entered. She moved with deliberate steps to the bench, her robe flowing behind her like a shield of authority. Though her face remained neutral, she noticed the same wall of blue uniforms in the gallery as yesterday. Their presence meant to intimidate. "Court is now in session," she announced, her voice clear and steady, despite the tension hanging in the air. The prosecution called their next witness, Officer Reynolds, a veteran with 20 years on the force. As he took the stand, Vanessa observed his rigid posture and the rehearsed way he placed his hand on the Bible. Something felt off. "Officer Reynolds, were you present during the incident on March 12th involving Officer Maddox?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes, I was," Reynolds replied, his voice steady. "I observed the entire interaction." "And what did you see?" Reynolds launched into his account, describing how the suspect had been aggressive, how Officer Maddox had shown restraint, how the force used was appropriate given the circumstances. His testimony matched, almost word for word, what the previous officer had stated. Vanessa made notes, her pen pressing harder into the paper with each scripted answer. When the third officer took the stand an hour later, she noticed the same pattern, identical phrasing, identical justifications, as if they'd all memorized the same script. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, after the fourth identical testimony, "the state would like to introduce the incident report filed by these officers." Vanessa nodded, accepting the document. As she scanned it, she noticed the language mirrored the officer's testimony precisely. Not similar, identical. In her 15 years of legal experience, she had never seen such perfect alignment. Even truthful witnesses recalled events with slight variations. "Your Honor," Brent's defense attorney said, rising, Given the overwhelming consistency of testimony supporting Officer Maddox's actions, we moved to dismiss the misconduct charges. Vanessa looked up, meeting his smug expression. Behind him, Brent sat with a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He thought he had won. "Motion denied," she said calmly. "We'll continue hearing evidence. Court will recess for lunch and resume at 1:30. The gavel fell with a sharp crack. As the courtroom began to empty, Vanessa caught Brent's eye. His confidence faltered for just a moment before he recovered, whispering something to a fellow officer who laughed too loudly. In her chambers, Vanessa paced, her frustration building. "It's like they're reading from a script," she told Angela, who was organizing files on her desk. "They probably are," Angela replied. "I've heard about this before. The blue wall coordinating testimony. It's almost impossible to prove." Vanessa rubbed her temples. "Without contradicting evidence, the jury will believe them. It's their word against—" A knock at the door interrupted her. Angela opened it to find a court security officer. "Judge Rhodes has a private meeting," Angela said firmly, blocking the doorway. "Actually," the officer said, his voice low, "I need to speak with you, Ms. Kim. Court administration matter." Angela hesitated, looking back at Vanessa, who nodded. "I'll be fine. Go ahead." 20 minutes later, when Angela returned, her expression had changed. She closed the door carefully behind her and checked that it was locked. "What is it?" Vanessa asked, noticing her clerk's unusual caution. "That wasn't court administration," Angela whispered. "It was Officer Daniel Ruiz." "Ruiz? From the precinct?" Angela nodded, pulling a small flash drive from her pocket. "He wouldn't come to you directly. Too risky. But he gave me this and said it's urgent you see it before tomorrow's session." Vanessa stared at the tiny device. "What's on it?" "Emails," Angela said, her voice barely audible. "Internal communications, original incident reports before they were altered, complaints against Maddox that were buried." She swallowed hard. "Ruiz says there's a systematic cover-up. Not just for this case, but for years of Maddox's misconduct." Vanessa's pulse quickened. "Why is he coming forward?" "He said—" Angela paused, choosing her words carefully. "He said he became a cop to protect people, not to help bullies hide behind badges." The courtroom reconvened at 1:30 sharp. Vanessa maintained her composure throughout the afternoon as more officers testified, each story perfectly aligned with the last. But now she heard the rehearsed quality with new awareness, marking each suspicious similarity in her notes. As court adjourned for the day, Vanessa caught sight of Officer Ruiz standing quietly at the back of the courtroom. Their eyes met briefly before he looked away, his face betraying nothing. That night, in the study of her townhouse, Vanessa inserted the flash drive into her laptop. File after file opened before her. Emails between officers coordinating their stories, original reports showing much more force than claimed, citizen complaints that vanished from official records. The most damning was an email from the precinct captain. "Make sure everyone's on the same page for Rhodes. Maddox is one of ours. We protect our own." One folder contained personnel files showing Brent's history. 7 excessive force complaints in 5 years, all dismissed. 3 involved black women. In 2 cases, the women were professionals who had disrespected him. The pattern was unmistakable. Vanessa's jaw tightened as she scrolled through documentation of the department's systematic protection of Brent. They had created a monster by shielding him from consequences, and now they were doubling down. The final file was a video, dashcam footage that had supposedly malfunctioned during one of Brent's previous stops. But here it was, showing him dragging a woman from her car during a routine traffic stop, his face contorted with the same rage she had seen in the grocery store parking lot. The clock on her desk showed 2:17 a.m. when she finally leaned back in her chair, her eyes burning from hours of reading. The scale of corruption wasn't just about one officer, it was an entire system designed to protect its worst members at all costs. What Officer Ruiz had given her could destroy careers, trigger investigations, maybe even reform the department. It could also make her an even bigger target. Vanessa closed her laptop, the weight of what she'd discovered settling heavy on her shoulders. Tomorrow would change everything. The next morning dawned gray and drizzly, matching Vanessa's mood as she prepared for court. She stood before her bathroom mirror, adjusting her collar with steady hands that betrayed nothing of her inner turmoil. The evidence on Ruiz's flash drive had kept her awake most of the night, her mind racing with implications and strategy. The courtroom was packed when she entered. More media than usual crowded the back row, their pens poised and eager. Vanessa took her seat at the bench, nodding to the bailiff. She noticed Brent looked different today, more relaxed, almost smiling. His attorney, James Peterson, arranged papers at his table with unusual confidence. Something had changed overnight. "You may be seated," Vanessa said. "Mr. Peterson, you wished to address the court before we continue with witnesses?" Peterson rose, buttoning his expensive suit jacket. "Yes, Your Honor. The defense moves that you recuse yourself from this case immediately." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Vanessa kept her expression neutral. "On what grounds, Counselor?" "Bias, Your Honor." Peterson's voice rose, clearly playing to the reporters. "We have evidence of your consistent prejudice against law enforcement officers." He approached the bench, holding out a folder. "The defense would like to submit Exhibit D, transcript from the 2018 case of Commonwealth v. Decker, in which Your Honor stated, and I quote, 'The badge does not place officers above scrutiny when evidence suggests misconduct.'" Vanessa accepted the folder calmly, though her pulse quickened. "That statement is a matter of legal principle, Mr. Peterson, not bias." "There's more, Your Honor." Peterson's voice took on a theatrical quality. "In the Roberts case last year, you ruled against qualified immunity for an officer who claimed he acted within protocol. You've consistently shown hostility toward police testimony." The prosecutor, Diane Martinez, jumped to her feet. "Objection! This is a transparent attempt to cherry-pick rulings out of context." "Your Honor," Peterson continued, ignoring Martinez, "we've also learned you've had previous negative interactions with law enforcement that color your judgment. Your Honor was detained during a traffic stop in 2015 and filed a formal complaint afterward." The courtroom buzzed with whispers. Reporters scribbled furiously. Vanessa felt a flash of anger. That incident had involved an officer who had been unnecessarily aggressive, pulling his weapon during a routine stop. Her complaint had been measured and factual. "Mr. Peterson," Vanessa said, her voice steady despite the heat rising in her chest, "ruling on matters of law based on evidence is my job. Nothing you've presented demonstrates bias, only that I apply legal standards equally to all parties, including officers." She glanced at the gallery and saw several journalists already slipping out, rushing to file their stories. The damage was already being done. "Your Honor," Peterson pressed, "the appearance of bias undermines public confidence in these proceedings. We respectfully insist you recuse yourself." Vanessa looked directly at Brent, who met her gaze with a smirk. This was their strategy. Smear her reputation, force a recusal, start over with a more sympathetic judge. The flash drive in her desk drawer suddenly felt heavier. "Motion denied," she said firmly. "This court will proceed based on evidence, not innuendo. Call your next witness, Mrs. Martinez." The morning dragged on, but Vanessa could feel the atmosphere had shifted. Officers in the gallery sat taller, exchanging satisfied glances. During the noon recess, she retreated to her chambers and closed the door, finally allowing her composed facade to crack. Angela appeared with a tablet. "They're already running with it," she said grimly, showing Vanessa a news headline. Judge in police misconduct trial accused of anti-police bias. Another read, Rhodes's history of confrontation with law enforcement raises questions of impartiality. Vanessa scanned the articles, her jaw tight. They've twisted everything. That traffic stop, the officer had his hand on his weapon for a broken taillight. My rulings were all based on evidence, not bias. I know, Angela said quietly, but they're painting you as having a vendetta. Vanessa closed her eyes briefly. This isn't about me. It's about making sure the truth comes out. Darkness had settled over the city by the time Vanessa finished reviewing Ruiz's evidence files in her chambers. The courthouse had emptied hours ago, leaving only the hum of the air conditioning and the occasional distant sound of the night cleaning crew. She rubbed her tired eyes, gathered her belongings, and locked the files in her desk drawer. The weight of the day pressed down on her shoulders as she rode the elevator to the parking garage. The smear campaign, her sister's worried call, the looks from court staff who'd seen the news, all of it swirled in her mind. But beneath her exhaustion burned a quiet determination. The parking garage was dimly lit, concrete pillars casting long shadows. Her footsteps echoed as she walked toward her car, one of only a few remaining vehicles. The smell of oil and concrete filled her nostrils. She clutched her keys tightly, suddenly aware of how alone she was. A movement caught her eye, a figure shifting in the shadows near a concrete pillar. Vanessa tensed, her finger hovering over her car key fob's panic button. Evening, Judge. The voice sent ice through her veins. Brent Maddox stepped out from behind the pillar, uniform replaced by casual clothes, jeans and a dark jacket. He leaned against the concrete, arms crossed, watching her with that familiar smirk. Vanessa stopped, maintaining distance between them. Officer Maddox, this is inappropriate. Just happened to be in the neighborhood. His voice echoed in the empty garage. Thought I'd see how you're holding up after today's revelations. You're violating the terms of this trial by approaching me outside of court, she said firmly, despite the rapid beating of her heart. I suggest you leave immediately. Brent chuckled, pushing off from the pillar and taking a casual step toward her. No need to be so formal. We're off the clock. He gestured to the parking garage around them. No robes, no badges, just two citizens having a chat. I have nothing to say to you. Vanessa started walking again, keys gripped tightly in her fist. Heard your little friend Ruiz has been talking. Brent's words stopped her cold. Sharing things that aren't his to share? Vanessa turned slowly, keeping her expression neutral despite the alarm bells ringing in her head. I don't know what you're talking about. Sure you do. Brent's smile didn't reach his eyes. Daniel's always been soft, too concerned with what's right instead of what's loyal. He traced invisible quotation marks in the air. He should know better than to turn on his brothers. People who do that, he shrugged, they better watch their backs. The threat hung in the air between them. Vanessa felt her anger rise, cutting through her fear. Are you threatening a police officer, Maddox? Threatening? No, ma'am. He spread his hands, all innocence. Just making an observation about how things tend to work out for people who can't keep their mouths shut. He took another step closer. Same goes for judges who stick their noses where they don't belong. Vanessa stood her ground. If you're attempting to intimidate me... Intimidate? Brent laughed, the sound bouncing off the concrete walls. I'm just having a friendly conversation about how unpredictable life can be. Even judges have accidents, you know. He glanced meaningfully at her car. Brake lines fail. Dark roads get slippery. Vanessa felt cold sweat at the back of her neck, but she lifted her chin. You're making a serious mistake. No, Judge Rhodes. His smile vanished, replaced by something hard and cold. You made the mistake when you didn't recuse yourself, when you decided to make this personal. "Justice isn't personal," she replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "It's necessary. So is survival." Brent's eyes narrowed. "Think about that tonight, when you're driving home, all alone on those dark roads." He pushed past her, deliberately bumping her shoulder as he walked toward the exit. "Sleep tight, Your Honor." Vanessa remained frozen until his footsteps faded, then hurried to her car, hands trembling as she unlocked the door. Once inside, she immediately locked the doors and sat gripping the steering wheel, her knuckles white. Her breath came in short, shallow gasps. The implied threat against Ruiz, against herself. Brent had carefully chosen his words to avoid direct threats while making his message unmistakable. She closed her eyes, focusing on steadying her breathing. The garage suddenly felt vast and threatening, every shadow potentially hiding another figure waiting to emerge. Part of her wanted to call the police, but the bitter irony wasn't lost on her. Who would she call? Brent's colleagues? The same department closing ranks to protect him? Vanessa opened her eyes, staring at her white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel. The fear began to transform, hardening into something else. Resolve. "This ends in my courtroom," she whispered to herself, her voice gaining strength with each word. "This ends in my courtroom." She started the engine, checking her mirrors carefully before pulling out. As she drove toward the exit, she made a decision. Tomorrow she would talk to Ruiz. They needed to move quickly now, before Brent or his allies could silence the one officer brave enough to speak the truth. The intimidation had only strengthened her determination. If they wanted her scared, wanted her to back down, they had miscalculated badly. This wasn't just about Brent Maddox anymore. It was about every officer who thought a badge made them untouchable. Every corrupt system that closed ranks to protect its own at the expense of justice. As she drove through the dark Philadelphia streets, Vanessa's fear gradually subsided, replaced by a cold, clear purpose. Morning light streamed through the high windows of courtroom 304, casting long rectangles across the polished floor. Judge Vanessa Rhodes took her seat at the bench, her black robe settling around her shoulders like armor. She had slept little after Brent's threat in the parking garage, but her expression revealed nothing of her exhaustion or fear. "The prosecution calls Officer Daniel Ruiz to the stand," announced the district attorney, a woman with silver-streaked hair and determined eyes. A ripple moved through the gallery. The officers in the back straightened, their faces hardening as Daniel Ruiz entered from a side door. He walked slowly to the witness stand, his uniform pressed and proper, but his expression tense. Vanessa noticed his hands, steady but rigid, as he placed them on the Bible to be sworn in. The district attorney approached. "Please state your name and position for the record." "Daniel Ruiz, officer with the Philadelphia Police Department, Central Division, 8 years of service." "Officer Ruiz, can you tell the court why you've come forward today?" Ruiz glanced at the row of officers watching him, then straightened his shoulders. "Because what happened to Judge Rhodes in that parking lot wasn't an isolated incident, and the reports filed afterward weren't truthful." A low murmur rippled through the gallery. Brent's attorney shot to his feet. "Objection! This witness has no direct knowledge of the incident in question." Vanessa leaned forward. "The witness is a member of the same department and has knowledge of relevant procedures and practices. I'll allow it." She nodded to Ruiz. "Continue, officer." Ruiz took a deep breath. "After the video of Officer Maddox grabbing Judge Rhodes went viral, I was instructed by my supervisor to sign an incident report that described the events, differently than what I saw in the video." "And did you sign it?" the prosecutor asked. "No, ma'am, but someone did, with my badge number." Gasps echoed through the courtroom. Vanessa tapped her gavel once for order. "I have evidence of systematic mishandling of misconduct complaints against Officer Maddox going back 3 years," Ruiz continued, his voice growing steadier. including internal emails directing officers to modify reports, body camera footage that mysteriously disappeared, and witness statements that were never filed. She turned to Ruiz. "Do you have these materials with you?" "Yes, Your Honor." Ruiz reached into his breast pocket and removed a flash drive. "Digital copies of everything I've mentioned." The bailiff took the drive and handed it to Vanessa, who passed it to the court clerk. "These will be entered as evidence and copies provided to both counsel," she said. Brent's face had darkened, his earlier confidence slipping. He leaned toward his attorney, whispering urgently. "Officer Ruiz," the prosecutor continued, "can you tell us about Officer Maddox's history with civilians of color?" "Objection!" Brent's attorney was on his feet again. "Prejudicial!" "Your Honor," the prosecutor argued, "the defense has put Judge Rhodes's impartiality at issue. The pattern of Officer Maddox's behavior is directly relevant." Vanessa took a moment before ruling. "I'll allow it. The witness will answer." Ruiz nodded. "Officer Maddox has had 17 complaints filed against him for excessive force in the past 3 years. 15 involved Black or Latino civilians. All were dismissed without formal investigation." The gallery erupted in whispers. Several of the officers in the back row stood up, glaring at Ruiz. "And how do you know this?" the prosecutor asked. "Because I work in records," Ruiz said. "I've seen the original complaints, and I've seen how they disappear." Brent slammed his fist on the table, his face flushed with rage. His attorney grabbed his arm, whispering urgently. Vanessa tapped her gavel. "Order." The prosecutor held up a folder. "Your Honor, we'd like to enter these emails as Exhibit C. They show direct communication between the department leadership and Officer Maddox regarding the altercation with you, discussing ways to, and I quote, make this go away." Brent's attorney jumped up. "Objection! These were obtained illegally." "They were obtained through proper channels," the prosecutor countered. "Officer Ruiz accessed them as part of his official duties." "They'll be admitted," Vanessa ruled firmly. "The defense can challenge their provenance during cross-examination." For the next hour, Ruiz methodically laid out evidence of corruption, falsified reports, and systematic protection of Brent Maddox. With each revelation, the gallery's whispers grew louder, and the row of officers at the back thinned as some walked out in disgust. Whether at Ruiz or at what he revealed, Vanessa couldn't tell. When the prosecutor finally finished, Vanessa looked at Brent's attorney. "Your witness, counselor." The defense attorney approached Ruiz slowly, his expression contemptuous. "Officer Ruiz, isn't it true that you were passed over for promotion last year?" "Yes," Ruiz said. "And Officer Maddox received that promotion instead?" "That's correct. So this testimony is nothing but revenge from a jealous colleague?" Ruiz met his gaze steadily. "No. It's the truth from someone who can't stay silent anymore." The gallery erupted in whispers again. Brent glared at Ruiz, his knuckles white as he gripped the edge of the table. When cross-examination finally ended, Ruiz stepped down from the witness stand. The wall of blue that had been sitting in the back was now divided. Some officers had left, others sat with arms crossed, while a few nodded slightly at Ruiz as he passed. Vanessa tapped her gavel. "Court is adjourned until tomorrow morning at 9. She gathered her papers, feeling, for the first time since this began, that justice might actually prevail. The nightly news anchor's grave expression filled Vanessa's television screen. She sat in her darkened living room, a forgotten cup of tea growing cold on the coffee table in front of her. The day's victory had been short-lived. Breaking news tonight. Officer Daniel Ruiz, who testified earlier today in the misconduct case against Officer Brent Maddox, has been suspended from the Philadelphia Police Department, effective immediately. Vanessa leaned forward, her heart sinking. According to a statement from Police Commissioner Williams, Officer Ruiz has been suspended pending an investigation into serious violations of department policy, including unauthorized access of confidential records and breach of chain of command. The statement goes on to say that Officer Ruiz's actions have compromised ongoing investigations and departmental integrity. The screen cut to footage of Ruiz leaving the courthouse, reporters swarming around him. "I have no comment at this time," Ruiz said, his face tight with strain. "I stand by my testimony." The camera panned to show two uniformed officers flanking him, their expressions cold as they escorted him past the media crush. Vanessa pressed her fingers to her temples. The message couldn't be clearer. Speak out and pay the price. Ruiz had known this would happen. He'd sacrificed his career, his reputation, possibly even his safety to come forward. The phone rang, startling her. She reached for it hesitantly. Judge Rhodes speaking. Silence. Then heavy breathing. "Hello?" she said. "You should have recused yourself when you had the chance," a man's voice hissed. "Now you're going down with Ruiz." The line went dead. Vanessa stared at the phone, her mouth dry. She carefully set it down, only to have it ring again almost immediately. This time she didn't speak after answering. "Think about your family, Judge," a different voice said. "Accidents happen all the time." Click. The phone rang 5 more times in the next hour. Each call brought a new threat, each voice different, but the message the same. Back off or suffer. Vanessa unplugged the landline but couldn't silence her racing thoughts. They were escalating, from intimidation to direct threats. First Brent in the parking garage, now anonymous calls to her home. How had they gotten her unlisted number? She checked her doors and windows, making sure everything was locked. She'd never felt unsafe in her own home before. Not like this. The house she'd worked so hard to buy in this quiet neighborhood had always been her sanctuary. Now its shadows seemed threatening, its corners hiding potential danger. Unable to settle, she moved from room to room, checking locks again, peering through curtains at the quiet street outside. At 11:30, she finally forced herself to try to sleep. A crash of breaking glass jolted her awake at 2:17 a.m. Vanessa shot upright, heart hammering. More shattering sounds followed. She grabbed her phone from the nightstand and dialed 911 as she moved cautiously toward her bedroom window. 911. "What's your emergency?" "This is Federal Judge Vanessa Rhodes," she said, her voice remarkably steady despite her racing pulse. "Someone is vandalizing my property. I need officers here immediately." She gave her address, then carefully parted the curtains to look outside. In the glow of the streetlights, she could see her car parked in the driveway. The windshield was completely smashed, glass glittering on the hood and ground. 2 figures in dark hoodies were still attacking it, swinging what looked like baseball bats at the headlights and mirrors. "Ma'am, stay inside. Officers are on their way," the dispatcher advised. The vandals finished their destruction and ran, disappearing down the street just as police sirens wailed in the distance. 20 minutes later, Vanessa stood in her driveway, wrapped in her robe, as officers took photos of the damage. Every window in her car had been smashed. The word "recuse" had been scratched deeply into the driver's side door. "We'll take the report, Judge Rhodes," said the responding officer, a young woman with concerned eyes. "But honestly, catching whoever did this is unlikely unless you have security cameras." "I don't," Vanessa said quietly. "Do you have any idea who might have done this?" the officer asked, though her tone suggested she already knew. Vanessa met her gaze. "I think we both know this is connected to the Maddox trial." The officer nodded slightly, her expression carefully neutral. "I'll note that in the report." After the police left, Vanessa stood in her kitchen, staring at the business card they'd given her. Case number. Officer's name. A formality. Nothing more. She knew how this worked. The report would be filed and forgotten. the investigation perfunctory at best. Dawn was breaking when she finally made the call. "Angela? I'm sorry to wake you," she said when her clerk answered, voice thick with sleep. "Judge Rhodes." Angela's voice sharpened with concern. "What's wrong?" "I need you to prepare every possible subpoena for tomorrow's hearing. Phone records, internal emails, disciplinary files, everything on Maddox, his supervisors, and everyone who touched Ruiz's suspension." "What happened?" Angela asked. Vanessa stared out at her destroyed car, the word "recuse" visible even in the dim morning light. "They're trying to scare me off the bench," she said. "But I refuse to be bullied. They want to play dirty? Then we're going to shine a light so bright on their corruption that they'll have nowhere to hide." "I'll get started right away," Angela said, determination matching her boss's. "Should I come to your house?" "No," Vanessa said. "Meet me at the courthouse. I'll be there in an hour." She hung up and walked to her closet, pulling out her judicial robe. She ran her fingers over the black fabric, feeling its weight and what it represented. They thought they could intimidate her, force her to step aside. They had picked the wrong judge to threaten. The courthouse buzzed with tension as Vanessa Rhodes entered the courtroom, her black robe flowing behind her. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, but her posture remained ramrod straight. She hadn't slept after the attack on her car, spending the early morning hours with Angela preparing the legal arsenal they would deploy today. As she took her seat at the bench, she noted the packed gallery. Word had spread about Ruiz's suspension and the vandalism at her home. Media filled the back rows. The blue wall was there too. Uniformed officers lined the walls, arms crossed, silent sentinels watching her every move. Brent Maddox sat at the defense table, looking relaxed in his pressed suit. He leaned back in his chair, whispering something to his attorney that made them both chuckle. The smug confidence on his face only strengthened Vanessa's resolve. "Court is now in session," the bailiff announced. Vanessa looked out at the crowded room, her gaze unwavering. "Before we proceed with today's scheduled testimony, I have a series of orders to issue." She nodded to Angela, who approached with a stack of documents. "The court is issuing subpoenas for the following records," Vanessa stated, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed room. "All internal communications regarding Officer Daniel Ruiz's suspension. All disciplinary records for Officer Brent Maddox dating back 10 years. The complete personnel files of all officers who have submitted reports related to this case." Brent's attorney shot to his feet. "Your Honor, this is an outrageous fishing expedition. These records are protected by department policy, and department policy does not override a federal subpoena, Counselor." Vanessa cut in, her tone icy. "Furthermore, I'm ordering Commissioner Williams and Captain Henry Parker to appear before this court tomorrow morning to testify under oath about the circumstances of Officer Ruiz's suspension." A ripple of murmurs swept through the gallery. The police commissioner hadn't been expected to testify. "Additionally," Vanessa continued, "I'm ordering the immediate surrender of all surveillance footage from the police headquarters for the 48 hours preceding Officer Ruiz's suspension." Brent's confident smile had vanished. He leaned forward, furiously whispering to his attorney. "Your Honor," the defense attorney tried again, "these demands are unprecedented and burdensome. The department needs time to—" "The subpoenas require compliance by 5 p.m. today," Vanessa stated flatly. "Any failure to produce these records will result in contempt charges. Is that clear?" The attorney's face reddened. "Crystal clear, Your Honor." "Good. Now let's proceed with today's scheduled testimony. The prosecution may call its next witness." The prosecutor, a young woman named Sarah Chen, stood. "The people call Officer Jason Torres." A visibly nervous officer made his way to the witness stand. He'd been on patrol with Brent during several incidents mentioned in the misconduct case. After swearing him in, Chen began methodically walking through the events of a traffic stop where excessive force had been alleged. Officer Torres, you stated in your report that Officer Maddox used necessary restraint when subduing the suspect. Is that correct? Torres shifted in his seat. Yes, that's what I wrote. And was that an accurate description of what you witnessed? Torres glanced toward the wall of blue uniforms, then at Brent. It was consistent with department guidelines. That wasn't my question, Chen pressed. Did Officer Maddox use only necessary restraint, as you claimed in your report? Torres swallowed hard. He may have been more forceful than needed. The courtroom tensed. One of the first cracks in the wall had appeared. By midday, 3 more officers had testified. Each account started confidently, backing Brent's version of events. But under Chen's relentless questioning, and with Vanessa ensuring no evasions were permitted, contradictions emerged. Officer Rivera claimed Brent had been with him during one incident, but time-stamped body camera footage placed Brent elsewhere. Sergeant Phillips testified that reports were sometimes streamlined to protect officers from frivolous complaints. Lieutenant Wilson admitted that Brent's record contained complaints that had been classified as resolved without investigation. With each testimony, the atmosphere in the courtroom grew heavier. The wall of blue uniforms thinned as the day progressed, officers quietly slipping out rather than watching the unraveling narrative. After the lunch recess, Angela handed Vanessa a note. The first batch of subpoenaed records had arrived. The prosecution requested a brief recess to review them. When court resumed, Chen called Officer Michael Dawson to the stand. Officer Dawson, you filed the incident report regarding the altercation between Mr. James Wilson and Officer Maddox on June 12th, correct? Yes, I did, Dawson confirmed. Chen approached with a document. This is your report, stating that Mr. Wilson initiated physical contact with Officer Maddox. Is that accurate? Yes, that's what I wrote, Dawson said. Chen then produced another document. I'd like to enter into evidence an email recovered from the department server, sent from Captain Parker to you on June 13th. She read aloud. Dawson, revise the Wilson report. Remove references to Maddox's initial contact. Make it clear the civilian was the aggressor. This needs to be clean. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Brent's face darkened. Officer Dawson, Chen asked, did you falsify that report under pressure from your superior? Dawson stared at his hands. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. Officer? Vanessa prompted. Yes, Dawson finally said, his voice barely audible. I changed the report. Maddox grabbed Wilson first, not the other way around. Brent slammed his fist on the defense table, the sound cracking through the courtroom like a gunshot. You lying bastard, he shouted. Order, Vanessa commanded, banging her gavel. Officer Maddox, control yourself or you'll be removed. Brent sank back into his chair, seething, as Dawson continued his testimony, revealing how pressure from above had forced him to protect Maddox repeatedly over the years. The blue wall wasn't just cracking now, it was beginning to crumble. The morning of closing arguments arrived with a crisp autumn chill. Vanessa sat in her chambers, eyes closed, centering herself for what would undoubtedly be an intense day. The trial had stretched for 3 grueling weeks. Evidence had mounted. Testimonies had contradicted each other, and the blue wall had begun to fracture under the weight of truth. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Come in, she called. Angela entered, holding a steaming cup of tea. Thought you might need this, Your Honor. Vanessa accepted it gratefully. Thank you, Angela. How's the crowd looking? Packed to capacity. News vans lined up outside. They're saying this is the most scrutinized police misconduct case in the city's history. Vanessa nodded. And Officer Ruiz? In the witness waiting room. He looks nervous, but he's holding up. He's braver than most, Vanessa said quietly, rising to her feet. She straightened her robe and took a deep breath. Let's not keep them waiting. The courtroom fell silent as Vanessa entered. Every seat was filled. Community activists, police supporters, media, and ordinary citizens drawn by the gravity of the case. Brent sat at the defense table in a crisp navy suit, his expression unreadable. He'd regained his composure after yesterday's outburst, once again projecting confidence. "All rise," the bailiff called. Vanessa took her seat and surveyed the room. "Court is now in session. We will proceed with closing arguments. Defense may begin." Brent's attorney, Martin Wells, a seasoned defender of police officers, rose slowly. His tailored suit and silver hair gave him an air of authority as he approached the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice resonating with practiced conviction, "over these past weeks, you've witnessed nothing short of an orchestrated attack on a dedicated public servant. Officer Brent Maddox has served this community for 15 years, putting his life on the line every single day." Wells paced deliberately before the jury box, making eye contact with each member. "What we've seen in this courtroom isn't justice, it's persecution. A dedicated officer under attack by radicals with an agenda to undermine our police force and make our streets less safe." He gestured toward Brent, who sat up straighter, the picture of wronged innocence. "The prosecution has built their case on the word of a disgruntled colleague, Officer Ruiz, whose testimony reeks of personal vendetta. They've cherry-picked incidents from a 15-year career of exemplary service, taking split-second decisions made under pressure and dissecting them in the comfort of this courtroom." Wells's voice dropped to a somber tone. "When Officer Maddox walks the streets, he doesn't have the luxury of hindsight or frame-by-frame analysis. He makes decisions to protect himself and the public, sometimes with only seconds to act." He continued for nearly 40 minutes, dismantling the prosecution's case point by point, painting Brent as a scapegoat for anti-police sentiment. He dismissed the videos as lacking context and the testimonies of fellow officers as coerced by political pressure. "And as for that unfortunate parking lot incident with Judge Rhodes," Wells said, his voice softening with rehearsed regret, "Officer Maddox has expressed his sincere apologies for the misunderstanding. In the dark, with limited visibility, he was simply securing an uncooperative individual until her identity could be established." Vanessa's expression remained neutral, though her jaw tightened slightly at the blatant mischaracterization. "I ask you," Wells concluded, "to remember who stands between us and chaos. Remember who answers the call when violence erupts. And remember that before you condemn a man who has dedicated his life to your safety, you must be certain, beyond all reasonable doubt, that he has betrayed that sacred trust." He returned to his seat. Brent nodded appreciatively. Prosecutor Sarah Chen rose next, her slight frame belying her formidable presence. Unlike Wells's theatrical approach, Chen moved with quiet purpose toward the jury. "Facts," she began simply. "That's what this case comes down to. Not emotion, not rhetoric about thin blue lines or political agendas, just facts." She activated a screen showing a timeline of Brent's misconduct complaints. 17 complaints in 15 years, 6 involving excessive force, 4 against black citizens, 2 resulting in hospitalizations, all dismissed without proper investigation. She clicked through to body camera footage, showing Brent shoving a teenager against a wall. Officer Maddox claimed this young man swung at him first. His report stated as much. The footage tells a different story. The courtroom watched in silence, as the video clearly showed Brent initiating the physical contact. "Officer Ruiz didn't testify out of vendettas or grudges," Chen continued. "He testified because his conscience wouldn't let him remain silent anymore. He sacrificed his career to tell the truth." She moved methodically through the evidence, the falsified reports, the contradictory testimonies, the pattern of escalation and cover-ups. Her presentation was clinical, focused entirely on documented facts rather than appeals to emotion. Then, finally, she played the video of Brent choking Judge Rhodes in the parking lot. This is who Officer Maddox truly is when he believes no one is watching, Chen said quietly as the footage showed his hand around Vanessa's throat. Not a protector, not a servant of the public, but a man who believes his badge gives him the right to dominate and terrorize. She turned to face the jury directly. The question before you isn't whether our police deserve respect. They absolutely do. The question is whether this officer has honored his oath. The facts, not emotions, not politics, tell us he has not. Chen returned to her seat as a heavy silence settled over the courtroom. Vanessa addressed the jury, her voice clear and steady. Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard the evidence and arguments from both sides. Now it is your responsibility to deliberate and reach a verdict based solely on the facts presented in this courtroom. She proceeded with the jury instructions, explaining the legal standards and charges with meticulous precision. Her words were measured, ensuring every juror understood their solemn duty. You will now retire to deliberate, she concluded. This court stands in recess until you reach a verdict. The bailiff led the 12 jurors out, their faces serious and thoughtful. As they filed through the door to the deliberation room, tension settled over the gallery like a heavy blanket. No one moved. No one spoke. The air itself seemed to hold its breath. Brent stared straight ahead, his earlier confidence visibly shaken. The gallery remained frozen, all eyes fixed on the closed door where 12 citizens now held a police officer's fate, and perhaps the fate of accountability itself, in their hands. 4 hours and 37 minutes. That's how long the jury had been out. The courthouse hummed with nervous energy as attorneys paced the hallways and reporters clutched coffee cups, their eyes fixed on the closed courtroom doors. Inside her chambers, Vanessa sat perfectly still at her desk. She hadn't touched the sandwich Angela had brought her. The weight of the past weeks pressed down on her shoulders. Not just the trial, but everything. The chokehold in the parking lot, the threats, the smashed windshield, the whispered warnings from colleagues. All of it had led to this moment of waiting. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister. Whatever happens, we're proud of you. The intercom on her desk crackled to life. Your Honor, her bailiff's voice came through. The jury is returning. Vanessa stood, smoothing her robe. She caught her reflection in the window, her face composed, betraying none of the storm inside. With deliberate steps, she made her way back to the courtroom. The room filled quickly. People rushed in from cafeterias and hallways, desperate not to miss the verdict. Officers in uniform lined the back wall, their faces stone. Brent sat at the defense table, whispering urgently to his attorney. His confidence had eroded hour by hour as deliberations continued, and now his leg bounced nervously under the table. The side door opened, and the bailiff led the jury in. 12 ordinary citizens, a retired teacher, a nurse, a construction worker, a college student, people who had put their lives on hold to determine whether a police officer had abused his power. Their faces gave nothing away as they filed into the jury box. All rise, the bailiff called out. The room stood as one as Vanessa entered and took her place at the bench. The rustle of clothing and shuffle of feet settled into absolute silence. You may be seated, she said, her voice steady. She turned to the jury. Has the jury reached a verdict? The foreman, a middle-aged black man who worked as an accountant, rose to his feet. We have, Your Honor. Please hand the verdict form to the bailiff. The paper made its journey, from foreman to bailiff to Vanessa. She unfolded it, her expression unchanging as she read the contents. She handed it back to the bailiff, who returned it to the foreman. Vanessa spoke clearly. "The defendant will please rise." Brent stood slowly, his attorney beside him. A bead of sweat traced a path down his temple. His hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. "Will the foreman please read the verdict?" The foreman cleared his throat. The room held its breath. "On the count of aggravated assault under color of authority, we find the defendant, Brent Maddox." He paused, his voice firm as he continued, "Guilty." A collective gasp swept through the courtroom. Someone in the back let out a choked sob. "On the count of filing false police reports, we find the defendant guilty." Brent's face twisted in disbelief, the reality of the moment crashing down on him. His mouth opened, then closed, like he couldn't find air. "On the count of witness intimidation, we find the defendant guilty." The foreman continued through the remaining charges, each verdict the same: guilty. The word rang out 7 times in total, each one another nail in the coffin of Brent's career and freedom. In the gallery, Officer Ruiz sat perfectly still, his eyes glistening. Beside him, several community members held hands, their expressions a mix of shock and vindication. "The jury is thanked and excused," Vanessa announced, her voice cutting through the murmurs that had begun to swell. "This court will reconvene for sentencing in 2 weeks. Until then, bail is revoked." Brent's attorney immediately stood. "Your Honor, we request that Officer Maddox remain free until sentencing. He has strong ties to the community and—" "Request denied," Vanessa interrupted, her tone leaving no room for argument. "The defendant has demonstrated a pattern of intimidation against witnesses, including threatening a federal judge. He will be remanded into custody immediately." She nodded to the bailiff, who moved toward Brent with handcuffs. "This is bullshit," Brent hissed, loud enough for the front rows to hear. "You planned this from the start." The courtroom watched in stunned silence as the handcuffs clicked around his wrists. The sound echoed off the high ceilings, a sharp, definitive noise that marked the end of his freedom. Vanessa's eyes met his one final time across the courtroom. Where once he had stared her down with smugness and threats, now his gaze was wild with panic. But Vanessa's eyes remained steady, unshaken. Her expression neither vengeful nor triumphant, simply the calm certainty of justice finally served. Cameras flashed as Brent was led toward the side door. His polished shoes shuffled against the marble floor, the chain between his ankles clinking with each step. The sound stood in stark contrast to his earlier swagger. "I want to appeal," he shouted over his shoulder to his attorney. "This wasn't a fair trial." His voice faded as the door closed behind him. The click of the lock punctuated his exit from the courtroom, and from the position of power he had abused for so long. In the sudden quiet that followed, Vanessa spoke one last time. "Court is adjourned." The bang of her gavel resonated through the room. As she rose to leave, the gallery erupted into a buzz of voices. Reporters rushed for the doors, phones already pressed to their ears. But Vanessa didn't look back. She walked with measured steps through the door to her chambers, her robe flowing behind her like a shield of justice that had, at long last, held firm. The next day, Angela waited by the door to her chambers, holding it open. "Morning, Your Honor," she said, her usually professional tone warm with admiration. "Quite the crowd out there." "Indeed," Vanessa replied, hanging her coat on the rack. "Has anything urgent come in?" Angela's smile widened. "You could say that." She handed Vanessa a stack of papers. The Justice Department announced a formal investigation into the entire police department at 6 a.m. this morning. It's all over the news. Vanessa took the papers, scanning the top page, a press release from the Department of Justice. The words jumped out at her. Pattern of misconduct, systemic violations, comprehensive review of policies and practices. This goes way beyond Maddox, Angela continued, excitement creeping into her voice. They're looking at everything. Use of force guidelines, internal affairs procedures, training protocols. The mayor's office is already drafting reform measures to present to the city council. Vanessa sank into her chair, the weight of what this meant settling on her shoulders. Not as a burden this time, but as a confirmation. One case had cracked open the door to something much bigger. "There's more," Angela said, sliding another paper across the desk. "Officer Ruiz has been reinstated with back pay. The department quietly did it first thing this morning, probably hoping to avoid more bad press." A smile, the first genuine one in weeks, tugged at Vanessa's lips. Good. He deserved better than what they did to him. "And Maddox?" Angela asked. "His lawyer is already making noise about appeals." "Let him," Vanessa said simply. "The evidence speaks for itself. The sentencing guidelines suggest 7 to 10 years. I suspect he'll serve at least 5, even with good behavior." She turned to her window, looking out at the rain-washed city. Somewhere out there, Brent Maddox was waking up to his first morning in a cell. The man who had choked her, threatened her, tried to intimidate her, now stripped of his badge, his gun, his freedom. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have hand-picked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.